Dairy Herd Shares on this Farm to Fork, Wyoming. Fresh, unpasteurized, raw milk, straight from the farm. Seems simple enough, but it's far from common. Not just in Wyoming, but throughout America. Drinking raw milk is controversial. Serve it to your family, and in some states, you're breaking the law. According to the FDA, raw milk is a prime environment for dangerous pathogens to grow, and therefore is banned for consumption or transport across state lines. But many believe this ban goes too far.
The perception of raw milk that has been brought out there by many different levels of government and possibly some advocates that are against it, most of them are very over-exaggerated and in my opinion, fear-based attacks. I would never do my kids harm, and I want the absolute best for them. And in my opinion, raw milk is the best for them.
Consumer safety regulators have recently allowed for herd shares in Wyoming, but they still maintain that raw milk is a high-risk food. For Frank and his herd share owners, this access seems long overdue.
Some of these people were actually living in Gillette, Wyoming, driving 5.5 hours to a raw milk cow share dairy that they bought a share in Colorado, and driving back with their milk so they could feed their families real milk. That some of them were intolerant to the pasteurized milk that is commercially available here. So that's where we really became involved in the food rights issues.
By allowing for herd share agreements, Wyoming has essentially washed its hands of the health liabilities consumer safety regulators associate with raw milk.
Some states, and Wyoming is one of them, still has an outright ban on selling raw milk. But we were able to change the definitions and the interpretation of the food rule so that it's very clear that you can own an animal or a share of an animal and be able to use that milk. So that's the way that folks who are really looking for this product are able to get it in Wyoming, is because they're able to buy a share of a herd.
It's clear with the present demand, herd shares are likely to grow in Wyoming.
We have 93 families that are, or single people, drinking milk from the cows that they own. So it's exploded. It really has.
A lot of bottles.
Yeah, I don't know how many bottles I own. Our shareholders own, but it's a lot of bottles.
Yeah.
So your Kefir is working now?
Yes, finally.
And your mom's got started with it?
Yep.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
At Frank's Dairy Delivery in Gillette, you could see how diverse these customers are.
I have from young, early 20-year-old guys and girls that are workout fanatics, helps them build muscle and be strong and have lots of energy. I have families with young kids that are feeding milk to their children. They believe that it's more nutritionally valuable than what's available in the commercial system. They think it gives their kids strong teeth and strong bones and to grow up as good, strong people and to reproduce, actually. There's some benefits to having a good body if you're going to have kids in the future. I've got people that are cancer survivors and are using the nutritional value of the milk to gain some weight back after some horrible chemotherapy and irradiation treatments and things like that. And then there's the people that are what the scientists or the food experts say are lactose intolerant. But if they try raw milk, suddenly they're able to drink milk. So it's really, they're not lactose intolerant, they're pasteurization intolerant.
That's actually one of the things that I love about this issue. It brings together the extreme ends of the political spectrum. So you've got extremely conservative agriculture families and consumers on one end that are concerned about the free market, who are concerned about their rights and their freedoms to choose the foods they want and to eat the foods they want and to do that in an economic way that's not interfered with by government. And then on the other hand, you have the extreme left-wing group that are the environmentalists, the foodie groups, the locavores, folks that see government as the solution to everything are on the same page when you start talking about food and access to local food and fairness and justice for agriculture people and for consumers and health and environment and all of those things. So that's really cool.
Herd shares have been a foot in the door for raw milk advocates around the U.S.
Just to give you an example, in California we have 2 licensed raw milk dairies and 150 cow shares. We started with 1 or 2 cow shares in Colorado, and now there are dozens. We started with 1 or 2 cow shares in the state of Virginia, now there's dozens. And this is the last 10 years. Pennsylvania, when we started, there were 36 licensed raw milk dairies in Pennsylvania. Now there's almost 150, plus another, probably an equally number of unlicensed dairies selling milks through private arrangements. The obvious result that the farmers benefit, that it's good for the local economy.
But gaining regulatory acceptance remains the ultimate challenge.
We've also been very diligent in putting together the proof that raw milk is not a high-risk food, it's not inherently dangerous, it has a very low-risk profile, and would have practically no risk if the regulators would work with us for reasonable standards. And I've always said I do want some regulation in this by people who believe in the product and not by people trying to put you out of business.
I asked Monica Corrado, certified nutrition consultant, to explain some of the thinking behind this movement for raw milk.
We didn't always pasteurize our milk. Why did they start pasteurizing milk? Because people got deathly sick from it. Why did they get deathly sick? Because they had brought cows into factory buildings in Boston, and they all got to stand around in their own excrement. We can say filth if you'd rather, but they're standing around in windowless factory buildings, no grass, no sun, and no sanitation. And then they're feeding them swill from the breweries as their food. And you wonder why people got sick? And now we don't have them in factory buildings, but we have them in confinement feeding operations, you know, with some of the same stuff going on. So what we're wanting to do is go back to getting dairy from cows that are raised the way they're meant to be raised, which is on grass, on pasture.
Herd shares are a very different business model. Share owners buy in and pay a management fee, and the farmer is able to pass along some savings by cutting out processors and distributors.
There's been some real tough times in the commercial dairy world in the last few years. Lots and lots of them have gone out of business because they just can't live on what the milk processors are paying them. Whereas the raw dairy and the cow share or the local dairy, the producer is actually bypassing all of those middlemen, and he's able to get enough income to actually survive and in some cases thrive, because he's getting basically all of that money that's skimmed off. Haha.
Many producers like Frank walk a fine line to be as organic as possible. Some refer to this approach as beyond organic.
I don't use genetically modified corn or soybeans or anything like that. First choice would be to buy from a local farm here, or a couple of local farms that are kind of like me. They don't go to the expense because then they have to raise the price and then I can't afford that. But they're producing some grains that have not been sprayed with herbicides or pesticides and things like that. Most of my operation would be certifiable if I chose to take that expense. But that's an expense I'd have to pass on to the cow owners, for example.
So Judy's asking about coming out and visiting her milk cows.
And I would much more prefer to be inspected by my consumers that are eating the food that I produce.
Then milk out there. They won't even have to walk up to the house. They just stay on grass 24/7.
A popular line of reasoning says in a perfect world, grain has no place in these animals' diets. But Frank sees a place for grain in his operation.
Our chickens need some grains and our pigs need some grains, and we do feed a little bit of grain to our milk cows. Our beef cattle get no grain from birth to harvest. In the natural world, a cow would actually get some grains just by eating the tops off of the grass. It's just the overfeeding of grain. The milk cows that are available today are not quite as... They're bred to produce a lot of milk, even though I don't try to get the maximum out of my cows. If you try to put them on just grass on my world, which is no irrigation, just the native grasses. They'll do okay, but the milk production will be minimal and they'll lose weight during the lactation cycle. So we do give a little bit of grain, less than 1% of their body weight, but their primary diet is the native grasses and hay in the wintertime, of course, here. And then that makes the highest quality of milk that I believe can be produced, with the exception of being able to be totally on grass. And there's some parts of the world that environment is able to do that. The people that live in the nice irrigated valleys can keep their cattle on some real lush, very good hay and grass all year long, and they're able to succeed without doing grain. A lot of the raw milk dairies are primarily grass, but a lot of them also do a little bit of grain. The largest raw dairy in the country, Organic Pastures in California, does use a little bit of grain. It's just the overfeeding of grain. And that's, if you're a commercial dairyman, you're on a contract with some milk producer somewhere who's paying you basically for volume. So the more volume you can get those cows to pump out, the better your bottom line, or the less your red line is. From what I read and see, a commercial dairy cow pumped full of antibiotics, fed corn silage, pumped full of hormones, they basically wear those cows out in maybe 3, 4, 5 years. I'm hoping the way I treat cows, which is pretty mildly, very easygoing life, no stress, good diet, they should last 12, 15 years. But I'm not pushing them to get the last drop of milk. I'm not pushing them to get 8 gallons of milk a day. I'm happy with 3 gallons a day because of the quality of the milk is what we're selling. We're not selling quantity, we're selling quality here is what we're looking for. So yeah, 3-4 gallons a day is good for me.
And the herd's calves are an important part of the dairy operation.
I keep the calves attached to their mothers. The first couple of weeks they are with their mothers the full time. And then we slightly wean the calves, I guess, whereas I take my milk and the cow share owner's milk first, but leave some for the calves. So the calves are on good, wholesome mother's milk. They learn their manners from their mothers. And also, the calf is the most efficient milking machine in the world. Mother Nature designed it. Amazing. And they strip all of the milk out of the cow, and thus I have no inflammation problems that are common in big dairies, or even small dairies that take their calves off of their cows. There's no mastitis or inflammation problems ever. I've never had a case. So that's a huge benefit. I get some feedback from people say, how do you manage that? What's the logistics? It's not too tough. We keep the calves in the corral after they've been slightly weaned. And after I milk the cows, we have the cows standing there eating some hay, probably just to be content while we're waiting to finish the milking. We open the gate and all the cows run, "Mama, Mama," and go get their supper.
I marveled at the seemingly endless variety that Frank packs into his operation.
Well, all of the dairy products I cannot sell, but as part of the services to the cow owners that own the milk, we produce Kefir, which is kind of an enhanced yogurt, blackberry Kefir, blueberry Kefir, pineapple Kefir, plain Kefir. We have heavy cream, which is the top of the line. You can see we've had to spoon this into the jar this morning, and it's so thick it will not take the air bubble out. It won't pour. I mean, it will pour, but it's very, very thick. But then we do a few extra things. Now we're doing some kombucha, which is a probiotic drink. Basically, it's an ancient drink made from fermented tea and sugar. And in our case, we put a little bit of fruit flavoring in it. And then we do some other fermented foods. Here we have the raw sauerkraut, which is a very good probiotic food, very good at helping building your immune system with the probiotic cultures that are in that.
How do I get it done? If I had my way, I wouldn't waste 8 hours sleeping, but I do go to bed. But there's always a big list of things that are need and want to be done. We start about 8 in the morning generally. First, I want to have these animals do their work and go out and graze and work on the bugs and work on the flies. So I don't feed the chickens in the morning, and I don't feed the pigs in the morning. I feed them in the afternoon, so they work for a living first. But I do want them to be full, and I want them to be growing fast, and I do want them to be producing eggs. So I do give them their extra food in the afternoon or early evening. A big help and a big part of our lives anymore is the WOOFer program, the Worldwide Opportunities on Organic Farms. WOOF is an organization worldwide that takes host farms like ourselves, and they have young, not always young, but a lot of times young men and women come and stay and learn about organic farming. And in exchange, they help with the labor a little bit. And in our case, they probably get some of the best food that they'll ever get on a woofing farm. I'm sure there's others, but I brag a little because... So in the last 3 years, we've probably had close to 15, young and old, some of them older than me, from around the world, from Australia, Israel, France, Germany, both coasts of the U.S., from the Midwest.
The steaks look so good. I asked Frank to share his recipe.
First you get a cow and a bull. You put them together. 9 months later you have a calf. You put him on grass and his mother's milk and a little bit of salt for 2 years. And then you hang him up for about 3 to 4 weeks. And then you put him on a hot fire. That's my recipe, with salt and pepper.
The question of where the next generation will come from never seems far from a farmer's mind these days.
Real estate prices are so high that young people don't have the capital to start farming. And the consequences of that, all the farmers are getting old. So when all those old fogies die off, who's going to put food on the table? We got to find some young guys and girls to start in farming.
At the Pinedale Local Fest, I ran into Frank and a couple of his herd share owners.
And I have cow share owners with me, legally drinking milk from their own cows. Aaron?
They're kind of combination woofers and cow share owners, and they're actually woofing on a goat farm in Washington State, and we are talking about maybe them coming back and becoming partners on this place, and maybe starting a little dairy with goats, because there is a demand for goat milk, and then maybe producing some goat milk soaps and maybe getting them a start in farming. That might be a way that I can help young people get into farming. Besides, it's fun to have young people around. And you learn a lot from other people. Even people that don't have agriculture experience, they come up with some really, really cool ideas. And sometimes some weird ones, but those are fun too.
These small ag opportunities seem to be making a big difference in people's lives.
The milk cow sharing operation that we're doing has actually allowed me to quit my corporate job. It's allowed me not to have to go to town and push out shopping carts and say, welcome to blank mart. I'm able to stay on the ranch. I'm able to keep my aging parents here rather than put them into storage in some old folks' home. All the money that I make is basically spent here locally, with a few exceptions of buying milking machines on eBay or something like that have all disappeared in this part of the world, but there's some still available out there if you're going to look for it. Here in Campbell County, we're not a poor county, but if you go to Torrington, or I went over and looked at a milk cow in Hot Springs, South Dakota, which is just across the border from Wyoming. That little town used to be vibrant. It used to have a little butcher shop. It used to have a grocery store where people could go buy milk and eggs and other local produce. The town is a ghost town. Everybody drives to Rapid City to go to the big box stores, the Kmarts, the Walmarts, which, I mean, if you want to centralize your economy, that's the way to do it, but not my goal. I would like to have more stable local economies. If you're looking at it from a lot of different angles, besides just being good for you and being good food, there's some national security issues to not having a local food economy.
National security and nutrition security. Steve and Deanne Doyle of Riverton started working on the local food idea about 5 years ago.
We're thinking all along about building a sustainable farm or a self-sustainable homestead. And a milk cow is an essential part of that. So that milk that we get from the cow helps feed our baby chicks, bum lambs, steers, and of course we drink a lot of milk. And then we have cheese and we have butter. We had piglets, and we still have more milk available from one little 800-pound Jersey cow.
With nearly 30 shareholders in the Riverton area, Steve and Deanne have gone from one family milk cow to a productive operation.
There's a huge need for little dairies like this. 2 generations ago, there was 1,014 farms that had sold dairy products. That was in Fremont County. Right now, I think we're It's one, us. So there'll be more.
Deanne is the expert of the dairy operation, and for her, it was love at first sight.
What first got me was the eyelashes. The first drive-by when someone told me there was a cow for sale, and she was right at the fence, and she looks at me. And she has these great big long eyelashes.
Deanne is also great at cheese making, so I asked her to make one of her favorites, queso fresco. Now I should mention, queso fresco, like other soft cheeses, poses some serious health risks, most notably from listeria contamination. Deanne's method would not satisfy consumer safety experts, so if you want to make cheese at home, do some research first.
The queso fresco, if you skim the milk, it's a much, much drier cheese. And the recipe that I'm making today is more of a softer cheese. This is 1 gallon of milk, and it'll make 2 cheese wheels. You can use store-bought milk as long as it's not ultra-pasteurized. If it's ultra-pasteurized, it won't set. And we'll add 2 tablespoons of plain salt. I just use a canning and pickling salt that has no anti-caking agents in it. You generally see when it's about to get 190, the top will start to steam and foam a little bit. We don't want it to boil or it'll taste a little scorched. Just got foam over the top, so I'm going to check that temperature again. This little gadget is great. We're looking at 190. There we go. Turn it off. I'm going to pour in half a cup of vinegar, and it will change to curds immediately. We'll pour this in slowly. You can see how it's curdling, and you'll see the whey is it'll get clearer and clearer as it sits. We're going to let that sit for 5 minutes. The milk cow is kind of the rock. It is the center of everything. It's the center of our life because you can't go anywhere, but it's also, it feeds everybody. It feeds the chickens, it feeds us, it feeds the pigs, it feeds the calves. And it's versatile. If we have too much or we get a kicked bucket or whatever, it's fertilizer. It promotes the live enzymes, promote the soils.
After 5 minutes, the cheese has cooled and curdled enough to strain.
Once I get more of the whey out, we will let this sit for about 15 minutes. So what I'll do is just kind of turn it on its side to help it drain. And this is what it would look like a crumbly cheese, like that. It's great to put on salads, sprinkle over enchiladas or any kind of casserole that you would want some nice cheese flavor on it. And you can change the texture and however you like it or what recipe you want it for. Drain it longer to get a drier, more firm cheese. You can also press it, and the more whey that you leave in it, it'll also make it creamier. So then I'll take it and just use the heel of my hand and cream it and kind of break down the cheese. When you first start out, it's quite warm. The longer you work it, you can get it to the texture of cream cheese, just about. Not quite as smooth, but that creamy. It just depends on your patience. This was whole milk. You salt your milk first, heat it to 190 degrees. You need to stir it to make sure it does not scorch on the bottom. And once it hits 190 degrees, you add a half a cup of white vinegar or any kind of vinegar you would like, and then you leave it set. You stir it in well, leave it set for 5 minutes, and then you drain it about there for the creamy texture. And then I put in about a 1/4 cup of jalapeno peppers that are chopped pretty fine. This recipe, you can add whatever herbs you would like, but we just love the jalapeno peppers, and you can use those fresh or canned, and I'm using canned right now.
Kind of like pickled?
Yes, pickled.
Ooh, I love those.
And then I will put it in a little cheese press here. And it's pretty soft. So we'll put it in here and follow it with a little chaser. Does not look like I got exactly half, because this is a thinner wheel. And you just press it on through.
Oh, that's quick.
For storage, I will take it and put it on this is a food dehydrator rack. It's just a drying rack. And after one day, I'll flip it over and it'll dry on the other side. And the air's allowed to circulate around it and dry it and make a little rind on it, the outside.
The people who are in our cow share program, they own part of the cows, we look after the cows. Well, that makes them sort of part owners on our farm, doesn't it? And once that happens, then they start taking a real interest in how the farm is evolving, what kind of rules and regulations we have to hurdle. Our relationship changes. It's not just simple customer-seller. There's a relationship that gets stronger, and the bonds are stronger for them to our farm, to our soil. These weren't things we foresaw, but we're experiencing. Pretty rich.
Production and local broadcast of Farm to Fork, Wyoming is made possible by generous support from the Wyoming Business Council Agribusiness Division and these fine supporters.